Well, hello everybody. Welcome to our webcast today. My name is Scott Metzelfeld. I am an account executive for responsiveX. We are located in the Chicago and Milwaukee area. I just want to welcome everybody today to our mobile strategy webcast. It's titled today, Finding Treasure, Digging Up the Keys to a Successful Mobile Strategy. And so just a little bit about how today will flow. We will probably spend about 45 to 50 minutes just covering the content today. If you have any questions about it, just connection or anything going on, feel free to just type questions into the side panel, and our team will get those off to the speakers quickly. We will be reserving the last 10 to 15 minutes today for Q&A. So if there's anything real urgent, we can kind of jump in and take care of it right on the spot. But we'll try to hold most of the questions till the end today. So it's my pleasure to introduce two gentlemen who will be presenting today. We'll start with Eric D. Boyd. Eric is the founder and CEO of responsiveX, and he is a Windows Azure MVP as well. And you can catch Eric on his blog, and there's the information there about the website for Eric. Also, responsiveX as well, which is www.responsivex.com. I'm also pleased to be joined today by Adam Hoffman. Adam is a technical evangelist with Microsoft, and so these gentlemen will take it away.
Thanks, Scott. All right, so today I'm gonna kick it off, and we'll get started talking about mobile strategy. Now, I'm not gonna cover everything, of course, in the next 45 minutes as it relates to mobile strategy, so just be aware of that. I'm going to cover some really helpful tips and things that I've learned through our experiences at responsiveX helping customers, and just being successful with mobile apps. So we'll talk a lot about the challenges that we have building mobile apps and how we can overcome some of those challenges. We'll talk a lot about the cloud as well. So just kind of prep that today. We will talk about how the cloud enables a lot of scenarios and helps us build successful mobile apps. So that's the flow. A little bit about responsiveX. Scott did a great job introducing us today, but what we do is really pretty simple. We help customers do this. We help customers build traditional client apps, mobile apps, and web apps that kind of center around the cloud. So this is really our expertise, and our forte is helping customers build apps around the cloud. As Scott mentioned, we have offices in Milwaukee, Chicago, downtown Chicago, and then out in the burbs in Oak Brook. And I'm flipping through slides, I think, faster than they're painting in, so I will try to slow that down as well. Kind of what we do is pretty simple. Like how we deliver those services really looks like this. We provide consulting services, and we help customers solve really tough and challenging problems, whether that's kind of strategy consulting or architecture design sessions or coaching existing development teams. That's one of the core things that we do. The next thing that we do is provide training. So we often are doing technology briefings, providing hands-on workshops, speaking at conferences all over the country, and so that's something else that we do a lot of. And then the last thing is, once we get past the strategy and architecture, once we get past the training challenges, we help your teams deliver applications. Now that could be on-site development. We integrate with your product teams, or we might just deliver projects entirely. So that's kind of the gist of what we do. We are a Microsoft partner. We're a very kind of elite Azure Circle partner, and as Scott mentioned, I'm also a Windows Azure MVP. So I'm going to transition here to kind of what we're here to talk about today, which is mobile apps. And let us know if I'm moving too fast, if the slides aren't loading in kind of fast enough for you, and I'll slow down. I think this research from Juniper is really interesting. And what Juniper found was that the number of global smartphone shipments are expected to reach a billion annually in 2016. And that growth you can see from 2010 is pretty significant. So the number of smartphones that will be shipped out By 2016, we'll be 1 billion smartphones annually. This next piece of research from Gartner kind of goes along with that. In 2013, 21.6 billion applications, mobile applications, will be sold for a total of $29.5 billion in revenue. That's a big chunk of revenue in the mobile app space. The interesting thing is the second part of that. Both of this is interesting, but the interesting thing along with the mobile app revenue is 25% of that is in free versions with mobile ads. So a huge potential in revenue with mobile apps today. Cisco also has done some interesting research, and their research is really around the data and the traffic. They're a networking company, and so that's where they focus their energy. And what they found is between 2011 and 2016, they expect the amount of mobile data traffic to grow at a compounded annual rate of 78%. What that means is kind of the number of mobile devices connected to the internet will exceed the number of people that we have on the planet in 4 years. And then last, the digital ad agency Verdict. They have also done some interesting research around mobile and tablet adoption, and they're expecting that the enterprise tablet adoption will grow by 50% per year, leading us to, in 2015, the mobile app development projects outnumbering traditional PC development, traditional client applications, by a ratio of 4 to 1. So that's pretty impactful. So I give you those stats to really lead off and say, why is this important? Right off the bat, we think about why is mobile important, and for some it may be hobbyist developers or independent developers that just want to make some money building mobile apps. So you may be building some informative, useful application. Maybe it's a calendaring app or something along those lines. Maybe it's a game. You could also make significant money, just like was found in the research, with free apps and ad revenue from those free apps. Now, to give you a couple of examples of real success stories, I think this one is pretty impactful. So we have Instagram, who built a mobile app for taking photos and doing some pretty interesting kind of overlays or design modifications on these photos. And Facebook recently bought them last year for $1 billion. So I can't tell you what their revenue stream looked like as Instagram, but there was an acquisition that occurred from Facebook buying Instagram for $1 billion. We move forward and start thinking about some other apps like Draw Something. It's a social mobile app that Zynga bought for $180 million. Now, for those that are not familiar with Zynga, Zynga is the Farmville company that makes all the Facebook games. They're also heavily involved in mobile apps as well, so a lot of the mobile games that we play are Zynga. Now, that's one angle on mobile. Maybe we're wanting to make some money building some apps. But the other is for those of us who have established businesses, maybe we want to just extend our current product or service out to those customers via mobile apps. Now, that looks like a lot of different things for different companies. Our customer base is generally Fortune 1000 and big brands, and so that looks different for every company. Maybe it's a retailer that wants to extend out their commerce transactions to mobile devices. I can tell you that eBay sees a large chunk of their traffic and PayPal transactions coming from mobile devices today. And I've heard all sorts of crazy stories of really niche retailers like Blue Nile selling $40,000 diamonds and jewelry in a mobile transaction. And so it's a pretty common thing now for us to extend out our existing product and service to mobile apps. So it could be commerce. It could be just improving and enlarging the accessibility and reach to our customers, and it could be brand building. Now, when I say brand building, maybe it's not that we're trying to accomplish a transaction with our apps. Maybe it's not an e-commerce transaction. Maybe it's not even really an accessibility and reach thing. So for the travel industry, for example, if you're a hotel chain, you may want to have a mobile app to allow people to find your hotels, to make a reservation, that sort of transaction. But maybe it's just building a brand. Maybe you're a fast food chain, and you would like to keep people thinking about your brand with something like a social game. So it doesn't necessarily have to be related to the transactions that your business conducts. It could be an extension of your brand. Now, when we think about mobile, we often think about smartphones and apps. We think about the smartphone app stores. But I would suggest today that it's bigger than just phones and smartphone apps. And you really have to start thinking about this in an omnichannel sort of way. So phones are important. We have other devices like tablets and laptops, televisions. I don't know about everyone on this call today, but me personally, I use my Xbox 360 in my living room a ton. And so apps extending to my Xbox 360, like Xbox Music, Netflix, those sorts of apps are really, really useful. And I hope that someday my car can do the same thing, and I can just play Xbox Music or Spotify right inside my car. And so it's really an omni-channel approach. You have to start thinking about this in a bigger way than just phones and smartphone apps. When thinking about kind of going beyond the phones and smartphones, we also have to think about other things like mobile advertising, QR codes, SMS messages, and location-based services as well. So it's bigger than just an app on a phone. And it's bigger than touch. Oftentimes, when we think about mobile apps, we think about just interacting with it via touch in our fingertips in an app. But we see today big trends in using the device capabilities more than just the touch screen. So the location services, the GPS services, the cameras doing interesting things like augmented reality, or just photo and video, using speech. So Siri is a huge thing today, and that will continue to grow as an input method for our devices, just talking to our devices and getting results back. We see the same thing with speech with things like Xbox Connect and the cameras with Xbox Connect. So mobile is certainly bigger than touch, and we're going to see a lot of growth in that area going forward. I have this slide here that I think is pretty interesting as well. We're seeing a new term kind of evolving, being thrown around in this mobile space, and that's modern application. It's not just mobile, but modern application is really kind of a transition. Historically, when we've thought about apps and software, we've thought about PCs and applications in like a battleship gray sort of format, where we have data entry forms and that sort of thing. But we're now extending to this modern application idea, which is we need applications that are responsive regardless of whether we have connectivity or not. So we need occasionally connected devices and applications that deal with that scenario. We need continuous experiences. So for those of you who are using Netflix, you can appreciate this. If I go from my mobile device watching a show on Netflix, and then I go to my Xbox 360, I pick up right where I left off, regardless of where I came from. And so those continuous experiences are expected today. We also, as consumers, expect contextual experiences. So we've talked about location services and GPS. Depending on where I am, I would like a contextual experience. I would like to be targeted, or I would like to target my consumers based on where they are. Now, that could be as simple as GPS, but it could be really, really interesting in retail scenarios where I am standing in front of a shelf of product using the retailer's app, or maybe using just Wi-Fi, and I would know that this is where I am in my store, and maybe I should send coupons or discounts or promos to a user based on their context. And social, as we all know, is extremely important. How to build those relationships or interactions in your mobile apps. Draw something we've talked about a little bit. That's a great example where it is an app where socially we can do some art and draw some things using one app and one canvas, basically. So when you're building your mobile app or thinking about the strategy around your mobile app, I think this is a great place to start. Identify what your goals are. So we've talked about a number of reasons why you would build a mobile app. This seems like a silly thing to have on a slide, but it's really not. Oftentimes we go at a mobile app of, there's a lot of buzz in this mobile space, and so we just need a mobile app without any real purpose. Especially coming from kind of the big brand scenario, we just need a mobile app, and it's what is the purpose? What are we trying to achieve with this? And so identify those goals. From there, develop a holistic strategy. So again, we need to think about things in an omnichannel sort of way. It might be bigger than just a smartphone app, and it probably should include things like social media, traditional marketing, whether that's web or email marketing, things like push notifications, stuff like that. So certainly think about this, think about your purpose, identify those goals, and think about it holistically, not just as a very specific mobile app. So let's talk about some challenges we encounter when building mobile apps. I'm sure if I surveyed the crowd here, this would be a challenge that would hit everyone, and that is platform and device fragmentation. This is extremely challenging for the business as well as the developers. So today, the devices are very unique. They all kind of do the same thing, but the platforms are all very unique. So from an iPhone, I have things like Objective-C and Xcode. That's where I build my iPhone apps. And Android, I'm using Java and Eclipse. And if I'm building for Windows, I use Visual Studio and maybe .NET or XAML or HTML5, that sort of thing. So every device is different, and there's fragmentation. On top of just the platforms, if you're going down the Android path, we have fragmentation in the devices themselves. So there are a lot of challenges around building those apps and just doing it over and over and over again, building the same app multiple times for the different devices. So what device should you target? Now, it's my view that in an ideal world, you would target all of them. I'm sure you guys have all experienced, everything's a priority one in your project management. We have as well. So we can't have everything being a priority one unless we have a really, really large team. And so maybe you can do all of this stuff concurrently. But if it has to be serially, then you have to really define what the goals are of your business and your app really is. So if your market really exists in iOS, then you should target iOS. If your market is really coming from Microsoft and in Windows, then you should target those devices. But define your goals, figure out where your target market is, and then prioritize your apps based on that. So again, I would say hit all of them if you can, but prioritize it and go after it in an order that makes sense. Now the next question then is, well, should I build native apps or mobile web apps? If I build a mobile web app, then I don't have to build this thing over and over again for every device. And there are reasons why you may choose to build a mobile web app. I would say it's not really an either or. You probably should have both. In native apps, there are a lot of value with native apps, things like getting access to the sensors on the device and the device APIs. That is very difficult to do with a mobile app and sometimes impossible. So you could get access in a mobile app to things like geolocation, but the other very specific device APIs you would not be able to get access to. So I wouldn't say that it's an either or, it's probably both, but native apps provide you a lot more value when you need access to the devices and platforms. Now, there is a way that we can do this in sort of a hybrid way as well. So with the creation of HTML5, we now have the capability of building an app. I don't want to say one time and using it over and over again because that's not real, but we can build an app and share assets and share libraries between multiple platforms. So there are a couple of ways we can do this today. Apache Cordova, you guys may be familiar with something called PhoneGap. PhoneGap was purchased by Adobe and turned into Apache Cordova. PhoneGap is that sort of platform. I can use HTML5, JavaScript, CSS, build my application, and then I can target devices. Now, it's not a mobile web app. It really has kind of interpreted a runtime layer that will allow you to get access to the device API. So it's kind of a middle ground. It's a hybrid. There's also Icenium, and Icenium is a product from a company called Telerik, and Icenium kind of sits on top of PhoneGap. So if I build my app for Apache Cordova or PhoneGap, I can use Icenium to take it to the next level. And so there are controls in Icenium that I can use to get controls that feel more like the native device controls and that sort of thing. So Icenium takes it to another level. There's one thing I haven't mentioned on this slide, and I should, and that is Xamarin. If you are a Microsoft developer, if you're a .NET developer, and what you really want to do is build your applications for iOS and Android and all the platforms from Visual Studio, and you want to be able to share assets across these different devices, Xamarin allows you to build applications with .NET and target these other devices as well, not just Windows devices. And that leads me to Windows 8. So in Chicago, you cannot get away from Windows 8 these days. The billboards, the train stations, everything is Windows 8 and Surface. Windows 8 has done something really, really interesting, and that is just natively, without these third-party middleware libraries like Apache Cordova and Icenium and Xamarin, you can build a native app using HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS. And so it seems a little foreign for folks at first, but think about it just like JavaScript is the new C++, or if you're a WPF, Silverlight, XAML developer, then CSS is the new styling that existed in WPF and Silverlight. And then HTML5 is just the design and markup for your apps. So you compile that down into a native app, and that's truly what you get without any crazy kind of middleware. So those are some ways that we can deal with those challenges of that fragmentation and the multiple platforms and devices. Cost. Cost is also a big challenge for us. Now there's two places that we incur cost, and that's in the development, and then second in the infrastructure. The cost in development really comes from a couple of things. One, trying to kind of tackle everything all at once. So we'll talk a little bit about approach. And the other is not being able to reuse assets across the different platforms and devices. So we've talked about how we can reuse some assets using these other techniques across different platforms and devices. But how do we deal with the cost of not trying to take on too much too quickly? And so what I would suggest is an agile approach to building mobile apps. Just like any other project, we have to think about and envision and build our strategy for what we're going to build. We have to prioritize what we're going to deliver. And so we hear the term in the startup world a lot these days, minimum viable product. And that's what we're really trying to figure out here, is what is that minimum set of functionality that would add value back to our users that we can release. It doesn't have to be everything, like it doesn't have to be everything we would like to deliver, but what is that minimum set of functionality? Build it, publish it, gather feedback, and then start this whole process again. It's circular, it's not a line, it is a process that will continue. So after we gather that feedback from our users, we funnel that right back in, prioritize another set of features, and deliver another application. That's one of the big values of the mobile app ecosystem and marketplaces, is it's very easy for us to deliver a new version. Easier than it's ever been in software because of the marketplace. So historically, if we were to deliver a new kind of boxed product version to users, we have to distribute media and users have to install it. And today it's really easy to just say update my apps in the mobile device. So that's the development issues around cost, some of them certainly, but now we have infrastructure. And there are a lot of ways that we can deal with infrastructure. We can buy hardware and put them in data centers. We can co-locate servers in existing data centers. But the cloud today is a really, really great option for us, especially as mobile developers, for us to just almost as easy as just using a credit card and provisioning resources in the internet in the cloud and using that for our mobile app. And if our app is really, really successful, great. If it's not, then we just stop using those resources and stop paying for them. It's not like making a capital investment in servers and a data center. It is truly as simple as turning it on, paying for what we use, and turning it off when we're done with it. So if it's a mobile app around a specific campaign, that's easy for us to do in the cloud. Scale it up and scale it down on demand. Now, the cloud is more than just cost. So this is a photo of my 4-year-old son, Jackson. And just a fun little story about Jackson. Jackson loves mobile devices. He is a little ornery, I suppose, would be a good word for it. But he loves mobile devices. And a friend of ours likes to let him play with her mobile device, her phones and tablets and that sort of thing. And one day, Jackson had some trouble getting into her device with the lock screen, and after a specific number of attempts unlocking that device, all of the data was reset on that device, and it was set back to factory defaults after a number of unsuccessful unlock attempts. The good news for her is this phone behind the scenes was leveraging the cloud, and all of her photos, all of her contacts, all of her apps even were all in the cloud, so she could pretty easily restore her device. But the cloud is more than just cost. It's that kind of scenario. So, you know, my 4-year-old may not be the scenario for you, but often if I want to go from device to device, like we've talked about in that connected, that continuous experience, we need somewhere to store all of that data. Users and usage. So when our app becomes wildly popular, when we become the next Instagram, we have to deal with that demand. So we need to be able to elastically scale that, the resources we have powering our app. So whether that's storage or application services, we need to be able to grow and shrink as our demand changes over time. This is something that we often don't think about, and it may not impact all of your organizations, but global reach is important for a lot of mobile apps, especially if you're an independent developer building a game. There are a couple of things that we don't often think about, and that is if you're an English US application developer, you may only be thinking about English and US. And the reality is we are a small chunk in the US of the global app population of the users. And so you have to start thinking about things like, how do I localize this application for that international market? Because there are a lot of users around the globe that may be interested in my app. Beyond just the users and that localization and internationalization for user experience, there's also this infrastructure scale challenge. We've talked about scaling the resources for our application, whether that's data or services, up and down in our data center using the cloud, but it may be bigger than that. It may be, I want to get those resources as close to my users as possible. So things like, where in the world can I put my application in a cloud data center to be closer to my users? What about things like content delivery networks? I want to cache data, whether that's, maybe it's video in your application, but I want to get that as close to my users as possible. So the cloud makes all of that extremely easy. Like Scott mentioned, I'm a Windows Azure MVP. And so what I'm showing you here is the global footprint of Windows Azure. Those blue dots are data centers today that are around the globe. So there are 8 data centers, Windows Azure data centers today. There are 4 in the US. There's actually 1 right here in our backyard in Chicago. And there are 2 in Europe and 2 in Asia. The green dots are the Microsoft Content Delivery Network in Windows Azure that we can leverage to get data closer to our users. So if that's media assets, images, documents, whatever that may be for our application, we can leverage that Content Delivery Network to get that data closer to our users. A couple of more challenges, and then I will turn it over to Adam to demo some really cool stuff in Windows Azure. So challenge number 5, engaging our users. It could be as simple as build it and they will come, but we don't just want to build it and expect users to come and use our apps all the time. It's marketing like anything else. We want to engage our users and keep them involved as frequently as possible with our application. And so things like push notifications for your device. Where it makes sense, where it's appropriate, send your users push notifications to remind them that your app exists and provides value to them. Maybe it's email marketing. Maybe it's having a mobile web presence that's responsive. And maybe it's finding a way to engage them socially via Facebook or Twitter, or maybe it's just socially in your application. We discussed kind of approach earlier in how we should be iterative in delivering our apps from a cost perspective, but it's not just cost. It's innovation as well. Again, we're trying to deliver small chunks of our apps. Because of the marketplace, it's very easy for us to deliver updates and new versions of our apps. So we want to deliver it in small chunks and get feedback. And there are a number of ways we're going to get feedback from our users. Some of those we're going to get like it or not. So the marketplaces will provide users with ways to provide ratings and reviews of your apps. And so we will get some feedback in that way, but you may want to pop up your own mechanisms for gathering feedback. Things like user voice are great for getting feature requests and letting users vote them up in a dig sort of style. Maybe it's sending out surveys to users and asking them to answer some questions about your applications. The other thing we would like to do that makes sense is gather telemetry data in your application and analytics. And so when I say telemetry, what I'm really suggesting is we would like to know when we build mobile apps what users are doing. Just like you would do in an e-commerce scenario, you would like to figure out if they make it 80% of the way through the e-commerce experience and then bail out at the end, why did they do that? We want to do the same thing with our mobile applications. We want to understand how they're using the apps, what they like about the apps, what they don't like about the apps. And so gather that telemetry data in your apps and do analytics against that data and iterate. So this really comes down to constantly evolving and delivering your application. So this slide again, just to show you this one more time, we're really thinking about this in a very lean and agile circular way. Talked about cloud a little bit, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but infrastructure. We want to have an infrastructure that adapts for us, that scales for us, grows and shrinks as we need. Things like storage. We also need some services, quite possibly. We need services to handle push notifications. We need services to handle authentication. We have back-end processing that may occur in our apps. Maybe it's image optimization or video encoding if you're a YouTube or an Instagram. Windows Azure provides a lot of services for us. This is just a quick slide to give you a really high-level flyover of tons of services that exist for us to leverage in our applications. Things like data storage with SQL databases or storing files in Windows Azure Blob Storage. Things like security and identity or media services, integration services for getting back to on-premise. And so we'll talk about that here in just a second as well. And this is the last big challenge that we have. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of other challenges that we could talk about, but these are the ones I've identified for today. And that is security and internal data. So identity and authentication. How do we authenticate users for our apps? Maybe it's we want to leverage social media authentication. So Facebook authentication, Twitter, Google, Live ID, Yahoo, all that sort of stuff. And then this last bullet point, if we have time at the end, I will show you a quick demo of doing this. But sometimes we have data that's private in our data centers that we want to expose to the outside world, but we're kind of scared to open up our data centers to these mobile apps. Maybe it's a situation where we've just never had to do that. We've never exposed our internal data outside the firewall. So how do we, in a secure way, get through the firewall without opening up ports in the firewall, without exposing surface area for attack, that sort of thing? And so I can show you some ways we can do that as well. This is similar to the slide earlier. This is a big slide covering a vast amount of services in Windows Azure. There are a lot of services for us to leverage. And Adam Hoffman is going to show us a little bit about mobile services that are down here in this lower left-hand corner. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Okay. All right. So I am Adam Hoffman. I'm a technical evangelist who works for Microsoft, and I'm pretty focused on Windows Azure. So Eric asked me today to stop by and kind of quickly show off one of the things you may want as you develop your mobile apps, which is the ability to host some data in the cloud, add authentication to it, and maybe take advantage of some of the push notification systems that exist on the various mobile services. So Apple has a push notification system. Microsoft has a push notification system that integrates with phone, or it integrates with the Windows 8 platform, and things like that. And so one of the things that you will often run into in developing your apps is the need to persist some data. So Windows Azure, as Eric said, is a really spanning, amazing cloud service with a whole bunch of different features in it. But one of the things that I'm pretty excited about recently is this concept of mobile services. And the real drive for mobile services was to be able to help application developers to put up the services, the back ends, the server-side systems they need to support their mobile services really, really quickly. The idea is literally to be able to get a mobile service up and running in a matter of minutes, and I can walk you through that. Now, if you have any familiarity with Windows Azure, you may have seen this sort of portal system here, but I'm going to walk through very quickly. I'm going to kick off the creation of a mobile services to show you how easy it is, and then we're going to flip over to one that's already up and running so that I don't spend too much time. Normally it takes about an hour to demo this thing end to end, and I've got less time than that, so I am going to just kind of show you this quickly. But in the portal service here, I can go to mobile services and click on new here, choose a mobile service and create one. Give it a name, so I'll call it the responsiveX demo .azuremobile.net. I will use an existing SQL database instance. Let's make sure I know which one I want to actually point to. All right, and I will pick a region. Pick that. Server, let me flip over and find which server I'm on, MFV. So I'll go ahead and do that. I actually want to go backwards here and pick in the West data center if I can, so that the database and the servers are in the same location. Taking advantage of an existing SQL Azure. Now, so Microsoft provides SQL Server in its cloud data centers in two ways. One is you can host your own SQL cluster on a variety of machines, and the other is to use formerly called SQL Azure, now called Windows Azure SQL Database, which is essentially a multi-tenant SQL Server in the cloud for you. I will go ahead and put in my configuration here and point my service to it. Good. And in the meantime, what's happening here is I'm creating this service. Now, what it's doing is it's actually setting up in our data center, in this case the West Coast data center, a series of RESTful endpoints which wrap around SQL Server using an OData, essentially projecting an OData compliant data source in the cloud. And by doing that, what I'm really doing is attaching to that database that I just pointed to. If you guys are familiar with SQL Server Management Studio, this is a real everyday SQL Server database. And I'm going to go ahead and show you on a different one here. This is actually attached to the SQL database in the West Coast data center here. And this is the database that I'm attaching to for the other demo that I'll show you here in a second. It's a parallel version, but it really is scriptable. You can do everything you would normally do in SQL Server Management Studio. Query against the data, see what's in there. In my other instance here, you'll notice that I have this to-do item table. We'll go ahead and develop a quick to-do app as a mobile service here, and I'll show you how quickly we can do that. If I run this query, you'll see that there's a couple of items in it. Flipping back, Oh, it looks like it's already up. Okay, so we've already provisioned the endpoint, and if I click on the URL here, it should project the service up and running. Now, that doesn't do a whole lot, but what's actually running behind there is a set of OData compliant endpoints wrapped around the SQL Server database. And if I go back to SQL Server Management Studio now and refresh this table, the list of databases here, I now see the responsiveX data that I just created. Inside there, I have no tables. All right, but the database does exist. All right, going to my mobile services window now. If I go into the mobile service itself, you'll see a variety of things. This is the Wraparound Dashboard that's available for the applications. Now, when this first shipped, just a few months ago, we essentially had a platform choice, which was only to create Windows Store applications. Windows Store is the new name for what we used to call Metro in the Windows 8 early days, but the Windows Store is the app platform of choice, really, for new Windows 8 development. We also, since then, have shipped literally about every 4 weeks, new stuff comes along for this platform. We shipped a Windows Phone 8 SDK, which is essentially a bunch of code that wraps around, that you can build into your Windows Phone applications that connects to that data store. We then shipped an iOS version of the SDK. The original version of the iOS SDK could get to the data but did not yet have notifications fully integrated. Now it has the Apple notification service. And then we added the Android SDK in the last couple of weeks, and I think literally just this week we added the HTML version of the SDK. And these are all essentially little hunks of code to help you write any sort of application you want to hit this mobile service. So the mobile service runs in Azure, a Microsoft product, but you can build apps in all of these different platforms to take advantage of that. So you can write one mobile application for that, spans Windows Phone 8, iOS, Android, and then potentially even BlackBerry using the HTML wrappers, and then of course your Windows 8 application, all to use the same data store. We make that really easy. I'm going to walk you through this very quickly. We make that really easy by giving you essentially a pre-generated application that points to your new application. So there's two ways to do it. I can either create a new one, and then it'll walk me through basically a demo application, which we'll go ahead and do. Or if you have an existing application, you want to connect to it and start writing data in there, it'll walk you through how to do that as well, including all the code samples that you need in order to get in there. Just making sure that on the cast, okay. Good, okay, sorry. With all the code that you would need for that. I'm going to go ahead and, just in the interest of time here, really quickly do the create a new Windows Store application. Now, if you want to do this, you'll need Visual Studio 2012. We offer you the Express Edition for free, or if you already have Visual Studio 2012 for any other edition, that will work fine. And then the Mobile Services SDK. I'm going to go ahead and create a to-do item table. Now, this basically, I can do this two ways. I can go to the data portal here and create this, or I can just click this button for the purposes of this demo. I'll do that. If I quickly flip back to SQL Server Management Studio and look at the tables in my underlying store here, after it comes through, come on you. It says it's created it. Where is it? Let's refresh at this level. Okay. There it is. Okay. Now it's gone ahead and created this table. If I quickly open it, you'll see that it has just one column, ID. It's not very useful, but it's basically the skeleton of a table that we can use to store our data. If I now go back here and download the existing application, because I'm a C# guy, I'll go ahead and use that one. I will download and open this application. It generates an app that's automatically wired to it. So let's copy that and put it somewhere where we can open it up. How about generated apps, responsiveX demo. Okay. I'll paste that there, and I'll simply open this in Visual Studio. Okay. Now, let's take a look around really quickly. I know there's a variety of people on the phone, developers and not, but what this has done is it's created this underlying Windows application, Windows 8 application, hooked it up to my particular service here, and actually generated the code with the right pointers and the security key that's embedded in my service, which I can see in the portal, and created a very simple application of a to-do list. If I look here, we'll see this to-do item has an integer ID, which will be the same as the ID that was in the column right here. That'll match to that. And then these other members here will be the text of my to-do item and the complete. Now again, this is the sort of demo application, but you can put any data you want in here. You literally create just a class of the data that you want to store in the service and start throwing it at the service, and it will automatically figure out how to change the schema of the underlying database to accommodate that data. So if I look right now, I'm going to go ahead and just actually run the application. Okay, it should be coming up. And hopefully what you're seeing right now is a screen that says responsiveX demo and insert a to-do item and an empty list right now of the items in my to-do list. I'm just going to say buy bread, something like that, buy bread, and save it. Now, actually, maybe I can put a nice, well, I'll just go ahead and do it. I'm going to say buy bread, and you'll notice that it showed up here. But what really happened by doing this was, and the code that ran the insert is right here, insert to-do item. It literally takes this connection to the to-do table, which was set up right here. This is all mobile SDK stuff. So iMobile service table, the name of the table, to-do item, which is in the SQL database, and I catch a reference to it here by calling the mobile service SDK get table with that same name. And then from that point forward, all I have to do is insert an instance of this class, which was to-do item. If I go to the definition here, is the class we just looked at. And so in one line of code, I do this insert async, and then this items add to-do item here just puts it in the list when it came back. In literally one line of code, plus I guess one line of setup code, what has happened is I will refresh the columns here in my table, and you'll notice that it's magically found that I need a text in the complete column for my mobile service. And if I rerun this query, script table as select to new query. I must have timed out here. Hold on a second. Yeah, sorry, I timed out on the connection there. If I rerun that, you'll notice now that I actually have that row of data in my service. Pretty amazing. So when you think about it, I put up a brand new mobile service and have a working Windows 8 application that can now write data to that and read data back from that. It's pretty amazing. So that's cool. I'll go ahead and add another one here. Now we're going to flip over to the existing version of an app that I've already sort of codified because I want to show you that it actually works in other places as well. So let's go back to the Atom iOS test here, which is exactly the same. It's just another sample bit of data here with a to-do item table, and I'll open up that version of the application instead, just so we're working on the same one. So let's close this Visual Studio, and now I'll take you to this one. This is the same exact application except wired to my Atom iOS test, which I've added some other stuff to, which we'll get to in just a second, authentication. But right now, just to show it to you, we'll run that one. And in a second here, it should come up with, there it is, test item and test item 2. Now, if I look in my underlying database for that, you'll be able to see in the iOS to-do, if I script that one as select, new query, and run it. Again, I'm timed out on that connection, sorry. Oh, come on. Yeah, it's a firewall issue. All right. Regardless, it's going through there. I actually want to skip ahead because I want to show you this running on the iOS platform as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm a Microsoft guy, but I'm going to dial into using GoToMyPC, a Mac Mini running on my desk at home, hopefully. Let me try to refresh that. There we go. I'm going to log into a Mac. And I'm going to show you the same iOS application to do. Now, all I had to do here was go to my mobile service, and I'm sorry if this is a little sluggish because I'm going through a wireless connection here, but I literally went to the same place. I went to my managewindowsazure.com, I went to the Atom iOS test, and then I clicked on the iOS version of the thing did create a new iOS app, and it walks you through the same exact process, except now using Xcode and creating an iOS version of the thing. It runs you through what you'll need. So you'll need, Xcode, and you'll need to create the underlying table. I've already done that, but it also generates an Xcode app. So if I take that exact same Xcode app right here, and I already happen to have that loaded up. So this is now the Xcode version of the application. Hopefully you're all seeing this. Okay, clicking out of here. What was that? It's a little sluggish. Come back. No, I don't need that. All right, I'm going to click on Run on the Xcode version of the application, which I have literally made no changes to. I downloaded this straight from the thing. There's my build. It should fire up the simulator. And now is the running in the iPad simulator, the exact same mobile services thing. So if I go here and put test item 3 in and add it, using that, you'll see that it just got added to the iOS version of it. But this is really just the same. I got to unpin this. This is just the same database that was here as well. So if I go back now to my application here and run my local test here, you'll now see the stuff that I just put in from the iOS simulator as well. So I literally have now, in just a matter of under about 10 minutes, I think, managed to put up a mobile service in the cloud with a OData compliant RESTful endpoint that I can attach to from multiple SDKs that are all provided. Now, I also want to make the point that every one of these SDKs is open source. So if you want to go and see how they work and understand the code, we have open sourced all those SDKs, and you can go and get the source code for all of those as well on CodePlex. And so if you want to understand how it works and write your own SDK for a yet unsupported platform, you can go ahead and do that as well. So we think this is a pretty great alternative for quickly developing databases in the cloud. And I've barely scratched the surface, by the way. You have the full complexity of the SQL Server environment. So anything you can do in SQL Server, you can do. As you saw, I connected to it with SQL Server Management Studio. I can, build very, very complicated applications using that, right? So that's sort of a very quick demo. I want to very, very quickly show you one additional bit on the authentication associated with this, and then I'll give it back to Eric here. So moving back to my application here, I had hidden some additional code in this to basically say, hey, I want to make sure that only people who are authenticated to some well-known provider have access to it. So I'm going to flip back to the mobile service in IE for a second here. I'm going to go into the iOS test, and I'm going to go to the Data tab. In the Data tab, you can see my to-do item table, but I'm going to now show you the permissions. And right now it's wide open when it comes up. If I go to the permissions here, you can see that I have relatively fine-grained permissions on the inserts, updates, deletes, and reads, essentially the CRUD operations for the table. And we support different variations on each of those things. So right now, anybody with the application key, and that application key is that long string that was embedded in the application, can read, write, delete, and insert. But I can change that to either scripts and admins. I can change it to be wide open for maybe you want a read endpoint that everybody can get to with no authentication. I can say it has to be authenticated. We can talk about the authentication. So I'm going to change the permissions on this thing right now to only authenticated users. Authenticated. And I'm going to save that. Now I've essentially changed on the fly. Close that. I've updated the permissions on that table in my mobile service. And if I go back quickly to my application and try to run it again, what should happen is, as I do this query, I should get an abort, and I am stopped. I am now getting an unauthorized error because I've basically locked down the application. So let's go ahead and fix that. We support 4 types of authentication to the mobile services right now. So you can authenticate with a Windows Live ID or a Microsoft ID, as it's now known, a Facebook ID, a Twitter ID, or a Google ID. And we support all of those natively. I'm going to go ahead and show you the mobile service authentication provider from the Microsoft ID, but if I actually show you IntelliSense here, you can see the different types of providers that we support, all of those. And if you want to make sure that you actually know about the users who are hitting your service and force them to do that, all you have to do is this. And so I've added this tiny little method here called Authenticate, which essentially calls the mobile service and does an asynchronous login using the particular provider that I care about. And if they don't log in, throws an exception. After that's done, it basically comes back. And so with one line of code on top of that, down here in the navigated to event, which is basically the page load, I'll go ahead and change the await authenticate to call the authenticate method. I'll save that, and I'll go ahead and run that. So very, very little code here, but I'm going to add authentication to my system. Now, magically, by me doing this, it hits the live SDK on the machine, and it does this differently, obviously for different platforms, but it's essentially very much like you would authorize your Facebook account or your Twitter account to use various things. I'm going to now log in with my account here. I'm going to do, if I can type, go ahead and sign in. And once I've done this, it should redirect, push the flow back. It's going to say, do you want to let my application do this? And this is what I'm asking for in the default demands. You can change the demands to anything you want, all the way down to just authentication information. But this is what I set it up for. And I'm now logged in. There's my underlying account ID, and in a second, now I get my data. And so in just literally a matter of seconds, I've managed to add authentication to it as well. I should hand it back to Eric, but I should also quickly point out that the other primary service, in addition to all the SDKs that we provide, is to enable push notifications, and that's essentially configured on the mobile service as well. And if I go back to, let's see here, my mobile service, my iOS test, go to my dashboard, you can see the push notification configuration right here. And this allows you to essentially wrap it into the various notification services. So Windows has its own method to do push notifications. Apple has its own. Google also has a cloud messaging version of it as well. And so this is all very, very little code and a little bit of configuration in order to enable your mobile applications to do push notifications to the devices as well. And so with that very, very brief demo, I will hand it back to Eric.
All right, thank you, Adam. So a couple of things that I want to cover. We're running out of time. I want to get to the giveaway really quickly. But one of the things that we offer, we're an elite Azure partner, as I mentioned earlier. If you are an enterprise customer, it's likely that you qualify for some free consulting. So I'm just flashing this slide up here. So if you have a Microsoft Enterprise agreement for software licensing, it's likely that you could get 3, 5, and 10 days worth of free consulting of our time to come help you do a proof of concept or something like that with your scenario. We provide you with training around Windows Azure and that sort of thing. So if this is something that would interest you, reach out to Scott, and Scott will put his email address out here in just a little bit, and phone number. Reach out to Scott, send us an email, and we can try to see how we can work with you under this program at Microsoft.